in the mid 80s. The market was at an all-time high of almost 34% representation of women in STEM fields. And can you believe today, here in 2026, that number is down to 22%. We can get into a whole conversation about what's that impact on AI and why it's so important that we have female and diverse representation in this era of AI that we are living in.
Yo, it's the future, don't hit the snooze. AI is here giving humans the boost. Team Humans rolling, brains in the game with Dan Turchin. Y'all remember the name. People reign in the mix, no stopping the flow. Better work, better life, yeah, we're ready to go. Robots and humans, a collab, you know. Okay, let's start the show.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're listening. Welcome back to AI and the Future of Work. I'm your host, Dan Turchin, CEO of PeopleRain, the AI platform for IT and HR employee service. Our community is growing. If you are not yet subscribed to the weekly newsletter, click that link in the show notes and join us. We share some additional fun facts and some clips from the weekly episode that don't always make it into the main event. We are all in this together. If you like what we do, you owe it to humanity to share this episode or any other one that you like with just one friend. They'll know that you care about using AI to make humans better. And of course, if someone you know shared this with you, say thanks and pay it forward. If you leave a comment, I may share it in an upcoming episode like this one from the mailbag from Lenore in Zurich, whose favorite episode is number 164, also one of my favorites, with Bruce Feiler, award-winning author and popular TEDx speaker about navigating life transitions. Go listen to that one if you haven't already. He's brilliant. We learn from AI thought leaders weekly on the show. The added bonus, you get one AI fun fact. Here it is for today. Dr. Manish Chopra writes at McKinsey Online about information versus wisdom and why meditation is essential for leaders in the age of AI. In a world increasingly dominated by algorithms, the scarcest resource isn't data, it's discernment. AI can process infinite information, but wisdom requires reflection, not computation. AI can generate insights, but not purposeful guidance. It can predict trends, but not exercise judgment. Meditation fills that gap. It builds the inner clarity and composure that technology can't replicate. It's a fascinating read. He's obviously a great writer. We'll share the full link in the show notes. My commentary? Yes, we need more of this. Purpose doesn't come from algorithms, and fulfillment can't be measured in tokens per watt. Being confronted with machines that seem intelligent creates an opportunity for us to reflect on our values and question what is truth when increasingly everything around us is the product of something that was either deep or perhaps shallow faked. AI is the world's way of forcing us to define our why. It's okay to pause long enough to hug a loved one, help someone in need, embrace pain, or do anything that reminds us while we'll always have free will, even when we choose to give machines agency. I thought this one was very appropriate as a lead into today's great conversation. In nearly 400 episodes, we've never had a leader with the depth and breadth of leadership credentials like today's guest. I'm proud to call Lisa Davis a friend, and I've been excited about introducing you to her. Lisa's been a CIO or executive tech leader at an astonishing number of respected organizations. That list includes Blue Shield of California, Intel, Georgetown University, the U.S. Marshals Service, and the counterintelligence field activity. Within the Department of Defense, over the years, she has served on public and private boards and has always given her time generously in leadership roles at charities, including the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and the U.S. Marshals Survivors Benefits Fund. Now in her next chapter, Lisa's focused on shaping the next generation of leaders in the age of AI and is an advocate for elevating women and diverse talent in STEM. She'll be discussing all of this in her forthcoming book, The Only Woman in the Room: How to Win in a Workplace Still Built for Men. Lisa received her BS in computer engineering from Syracuse University. Go Orange.
Woo!
And without further ado, Lisa, my friend, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the podcast. Let's get started by having you share a bit more about that illustrious background and how you got to where you are today.
Oh, thanks, Dan, for that generous introduction. I've been looking forward to our conversation as well. So good to be connected again. My background, I would say, is certainly nonlinear. I think it's important to call that out because so many young people think that your career progression must happen in a linear fashion, and I'm here to say absolutely not. I started as a computer engineer at Syracuse, as you said, in the mid 80s. Very few women in the major. I think it's where I started, the only woman in the room while I was in college, and quickly spent, after graduation, 26 years in Department of Defense. You called out some of the roles that I served as a CIO. Transitioned out of government, retired after 26 years of service. Went over to be the CIO of Georgetown University. Fascinating experience transitioning from DoD, as you can imagine, to an academic environment. Really had the pleasure moving the family across the country to California, spending 5.5 years at Intel, first on the technology side for about 18 months, and then amazing opportunity to run a multi-billion-dollar P&L to resurrect the data center business for enterprise and government. And that was global enterprises and government. Fascinating role in which I learned a tremendous amount. And like you said, last 5 years at Blue Shield of California in healthcare, understanding that healthcare right before the pandemic, joined Blue Shield in February 2020, if you can believe that. 1 week later, we took the company completely remote. I had the honor to serve on California's vaccine task force. That was an incredible experience. And now I'm working on my portfolio career, my board work. Been working on this book this past year, 2025. We're ready to launch in 2026. Executive coaching and mentoring and spending time traveling, people I care about. So life is good, Dan.
Life is good. And let's see, gosh, when I first saw you on stage, you radiate charisma, but also empathy. And as we got to know each other as humans, I realized, how much depth there is to you. Maybe let's just start by having you share a little bit about your leadership style.
Yeah, my leadership style, it's an overused term, but I still like to use it, is authentic. It's authentic leadership. It's leading with clarity, with conviction. It's caring about the people that work with you, partner with you, the organizations you lead, being vested in their success in terms of helping them reach their personal and professional goals, being honest, transparent, but always, driving to outcomes and results. And I think there's a misnomer that you can't be an authentic leader or an empathetic leader and not still deliver results or drive to outcomes. And I certainly don't believe that's true. I believe you very much need to be both, because that's where you build trust with people. And when people trust you and they want to follow you and are inspired by the work that we're doing in partnership, that's when the magic happens in terms of leadership.
Before we started recording, we were talking about how you feel about the forthcoming book, and you said something that means a lot. You said, it feels kind of vulnerable. Like there's a lot of very personal stories that you're sharing. You also had shared in a post online your 6 core values. I'd love to hear in your words, which of the 6 is the hardest to live by?
Growing up in DoD, it instilled in me and watching leaders integrity, honesty, loyalty, and service. So, those values were really, I grew with them as I became a leader myself with 26 years of service in the federal government. And now, as I have been writing the book over the last year, and I tell you, it's been a incredible form of therapy to a certain extent, Dan, because there's so much reflection over these decades of leadership and sharing my personal stories of what did it take to persevere and to succeed. So I talk about these core values now, and I've captured them in terms of leading with heart, choosing discomfort, which we can pull apart a little more, owning your power, going with grit. What does it mean to go with grit? Taking care of yourself before you can take care of others, because many of us as leaders and executives forget to do that until we reach burnout. And the last one, which I'm going to answer your question, is what do I think is the hardest? And that's build what should be. And the reason I say that is I look back on my over 30-year career and the systems that I had to navigate in order to persevere and succeed as a leader. And sadly, Dan, those systems haven't changed. And that's part of what the book really talks about. You know, how is it we're here in 2026 and, you know, we were supposed to break the glass ceiling years ago, but it feels like the walls are closing in, the hallways are getting narrower, there's less female and diverse representation at the top. And frankly, I know I feel, and many others feel, that we're going backwards, not forward in the current state of affairs of where we are here in 2026. So there's so much more work to do. Yes, we've made strides, and I don't want to, you know, not respect and value the amazing female leadership and strides we've made. But if you look where we are in 2026, our numbers and our representation are actually worse than they were when I was entering the workplace in 1985.
Unbelievable.
Not good.
Whenever we meet up in person, I always pepper you with questions about, this is before I knew what the title of the book was, but about what it was like to be, was like to be the only woman in the room. And because I realized that, you know, as a white privileged male, I don't see rooms the way you see them. And just given, you know, how you and other exceptionally, you know, talented female leaders, you know, experience a different view of the world than I do. Give us maybe an example of what are some things that the world doesn't see to make us appreciate, you know, what that feels like.
Yeah, it's a complex question. You know, you do it enough, you think you get used to it. And I'll share a recent story. I share this story in my book, Dan. You know, it wasn't that long ago when I was the senior executive going with the team and meeting our team partners at JP Morgan. Up on the top floor, JP Morgan conference room, huge conference room. And I go and they have a seat for me and I go to sit in the middle of the room. And all of the JP Morgan, no offense to JP Morgan, but all the JP Morgan folks come filing in. And sometimes you sit there and you're like, oh my goodness, this can't be happening. Every single person that filed in that conference room was male. And they kind of all looked the same suit, same white collared shirt. We went to sit down and there must have been 50 people in this meeting. And I was the only woman sitting in the center of the table and one of the most senior with the other senior executive at JP Morgan. And I thought to myself, how does this keep happening? Why does this keep happening? And what are we going to do to ultimately change this? And I think for women navigating these type of rooms, there's always unspoken rules. If anyone has seen, and Dan, you have daughters, I know this, maybe seen the Barbie movie where we talk about you can't be too aggressive, you can't be too kind, you can't be this, you can't be that. We always feel like we're balancing this fine line to, one, be respected for what we bring to the table, accepted to being at the table so that our voices are equal and represented. And one of the things that really frustrates me when we think about, God forbid we use the word diversity, equity, inclusion, it was never because we got a free ride. It's always because we had to work harder, longer, prove ourselves even more to even get to having a seat at the table. And that is what women navigate day in and day out. And goodness, if they have families that are taking care of aging parents. One of the things I talk about in the book, it's really hard to have a successful career when you're doing it alone. Having an incredible partner, Dan, I know that you're an incredible partner. I'm very blessed to have an incredible partner that supports my career goals. Approaching our family, our life together in partnership in terms of sharing responsibilities, women having support networks that allow them. I always talk about a personal board of directors. It's lonely, and it gets lonely the higher you climb and the more senior you become. That's just a glimpse of what, women endure every day. You look around the room and you're like, where are all the women?
So it manifests itself when you're in that JP Morgan, mahogany desk room and, with all the white, collared stiff shirts, whatever it is, exactly the way you described it. But I've got to think that the how to win part starts way before you're in the boardroom, right? So what can we tell the girls or underrepresented minorities who are in school who just need to be inspired? They need to feel like they're worth being in that room. Like,
absolutely,
they have every bit as much right to be in that room as anyone else does. How do we start earlier?
I think we start way earlier, and we start as we think about how we raise young boys and young girls and the cultural norms, right, that we teach our sons and our daughters. And, I have 2 daughters and 1 son. And it's so funny. Both of my daughters, I don't know how many times, whether it was in Montessori school, public school system, I'd get calls. Your daughter is bossing everybody around, and then of course I laugh. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. I realize that as well. But, the other students are following them, blah, blah. And I'm like, she's bossy, all the typical bossy, assertive. And I would say, yeah, these are leadership qualities. And I never tempered those. Just like I think it's just as important to teach our sons in terms of being vulnerable, of being empathetic, of the kindness and the respect and the partnership. And I think role models as parents are really important to show our sons and daughters. So it starts early with those cultural norms in terms of how we're treating our kids. And then it grows. And we know that middle school is a tough period for boys and girls, but I would say it's particularly tough on girls in terms of peer pressure and trying to fit in. And, Dan, the data actually shows this is where we start losing our girls in terms of math and science and engineering because they don't want to appear too smart. They don't want to, be out in front, and they're trying to blend in and have a friend group. And what happens is when these young girls are then approaching high school, they're not taking the advanced math classes, the physics, the engineering type classes to prepare them for these engineering roles or STEM roles when they get to college. And I was sharing with you this crazy statistic. When I graduated in the mid 80s in computer engineering, the market was at an all-time high of almost 34% representation of women in STEM fields. And can you believe today, here in 2026, that number is down to 22%. And we can get into a whole conversation, I know we will, about what's that impact on AI and why it's so important that we have female and diverse representation in this era of AI that we are living in.
So thankfully, we have you as part of the solution. So you've had a chance to grow teams and lived your values. And you've got a bunch of entrepreneurs, leaders, CXOs, et cetera, listening. How do you create a culture that sees beyond gender?
You create a culture by, first of all, you need to be purposeful in what you measure, because what you measure is what people do. And I've found this leading organizations. And if you look at middle layers of management within your organizations, you'll find, certainly in technology organizations, women that are stuck in roles 5, 7, 10 years. And if you're not asking as a leader, why isn't this person being promoted? What is missing from X number of women moving up to the next level? So I think you have to be, as a leader, very purposeful in understanding what is happening within your organization and look at the numbers. Then there's lots of things we can do, because people hire people like themselves. So having diverse hiring panels, having diversity in your leadership, establishing role models, giving equal opportunity, and goodness gracious, equal pay for men and women doing the same job. There's so many things we can do as leaders in order to support both men and women. And then we look at the broader systems at which we operate in. Why is it we are one of the, if not the top, modernized, innovative country in the world, but yet we do not have paid family leave? Why is it we lag behind in policies supporting remote work, giving flexibility to women in the workplace, and men too, if they needed to support their families? I'm not saying one should have something more than the other. It should be a zero-sum game, frankly. But these systems and policies of supporting women in the workplace, one of the things I've always found fascinating, and one of my colleagues, Reshma Sujani, talks about it. She's was the CEO of Girls Who Code, was, why is the workplace designed from 9 to 3, from 9 to 5, when our kids get out of school at 2 and 2:30 in the afternoon? This system was designed, maybe after World War II? Men in the workplace, it was never designed for women to thrive in careers in the workplace. And this is what I bring up in my book. It's time for us to look at these systems, to change these systems. Because if you brought all of, a great quote by Sheryl Sandberg, I just read, this is perfect. If you looked at all the progress that all of the European nations have made, and we brought 7 million women back into the workplace, that would have a economic growth of almost 4.5% on our overall economy. So why aren't we doing this? Why aren't we creating systems that allow both men and women to thrive in the workplace?
Great examples. We could certainly spend a whole conversation just unpacking that one. But we do need to talk a little bit about AI, and such a complicated time to be in the workplace as a leader, as an employee, certainly as an early in your career employee.
Today's episode is brought to you by my company, PeopleRain. As you hopefully know, PeopleRain is the AI platform that automates work. Tens of millions of employees around the world get back 4 to 6 hours per week because People Rain automates away the friction. Imagine a world where your teams never have to wait for technology upgrades or to have a human reset their password or get added to a distribution list or get help with payroll, PTO, or benefits. Inbox zero for the help desk, zero friction for employees. That's the future of work. That's People Rain. We're offering all members of Team Human, and hey, that's you, our listeners, an exclusive discount on People Rain just for being part of this amazing community. Get the discount code at peoplerain.io/podcast. That's People Rain, like the reign of a king or queen.io/podcast. Now back to this week's conversation.
AI both has the potential to amplify human bias, but it doesn't have to. It could also be a force for good.
Yes.
How do you think about just this complicated relationship that employees have with AI, and kind of how do you reflect on how the best way to onboard AI into a workplace?
Yeah, it is. As leaders, I would start by saying, Dan, I think it's important to recognize and value the input that we're hearing from our employees. And frankly, they have a reason to be skeptical. Am I replaceable? How do I continue to grow in my career? How will AI be leveraged? And sadly, what we're hearing more in the workplace is how AI is replacing jobs. I mentor so many young people coming out of college, just brilliant men and women, and they can't find jobs coming out of school. And I think, aren't we being short-sighted in terms of leadership pipelines, talent, infusing these incredible minds that have been growing up in this digital era in terms of how we leverage those minds in terms of the work that we're doing within the company? So I always view, and I'm Team Human, but I have always said that we need to view AI as an amplifier. And that's an amplifier to unleashing human potential. And if we view AI, frankly, as a technology/tool that allows me with humans, with people, and the judgment and the wisdom and the clarity that people bring to the table, that's when I think we unlock the power of AI. But it seems many companies and many leaders aren't doing that. And I think if we took a step back and realized that it's never about the technology, it's never been just about the technology, it's always about the people, the process, the culture, and the technology. And we viewed it more holistically as how we would leverage and adopt AI and amplify the workforce and capabilities I have, then I think we really drive some interesting and meaningful outcomes.
Obviously, we're in such violent agreement on that
Yes.
respect. We just early in, we're only a few years into this kind of global AI experiment, but we go out of our way to frame the conversation in terms of, the machines or us.
Yes.
They're the adversary. They're never an ally. And we miss lots of opportunities. We've just cultivated this enormous blind spot to demonstrating, how and where AI can augment things that humans aren't always great at. And that's okay. As a leader, you've got this big platform. You're writing the book. You're going to be going on speaking tours. People are going to listen to you. How do you get the message out that it's not them versus us?
Isn't it interesting that we've come to this point with technology that we're phrasing it as them versus us?
Glad you picked up on that. Absolutely.
You look at all the incredible innovation, whether it was, the internet, the .com, cloud computing, and we've never talked about technology as a either or. It was always leveraged as a tool of capability that amplified, accelerated, automated work to allow humans to do different, work that requires more strategic, critical thinking, systems thinking. And it's unfortunate that it has now been we're naming it as either or, and I certainly don't believe. I think it's just a lot of rhetoric. I've also already thrown the BS flag on all of it's because of AI that we have all these layoffs. Frankly, we have layoffs because leaders are overspending capital spending. They can't make the numbers work. So the way they justify the numbers is continual cutting of cost, and that means laying off people. Why don't we just call it what it really is? So I think it's important for leaders, you and I, Dan, and others, to say, wait a minute, how are we going to leverage AI to improve the world, to drive advances in healthcare, to drive advances in quantum computing, to solve problems we haven't been able to solve? I don't believe it has to be either or. I believe it's a we. And when we leverage the technology jointly is when I think we will see amazing advances across a whole set of disciplines because of the compute power and now the data power that we've had that we haven't had in the past.
The AI optimist in me says that Lisa and Dan are going to be back here in 10 years having a version of this conversation, and we will have used AI for good, and the workplace
Absolutely.
will be a more positive environment, and we'll create safe places where humans can flourish. But there's a realist in me, and I know a realist in you, that says, kind of like that disturbing stat that you cited about females in STEM careers, we could also be on the precipice of perpetuating some of these dangerous new workplace behaviors that we'll be trying to undo in 10 years. About how we educate leaders today to prepare for the utopian and not the dystopian version of that.
Well, I would start by saying, as we think about AI, whatever technology, it requires strong governance, rules in terms of how we process and leverage the data, privacy, security. And when we don't put in those frameworks to guide the use of technology, then we get outcomes and we get results that are certainly not the ones that we want. So and we talk about, I remember the MIT stat, why is it that 95% of enterprises aren't seeing an ROI in AI? Well, because it's never about the technology, like I already said. You need those governance frameworks. You need the privacy, the cybersecurity. You need to understand the prioritization of how you're going to use AI. And more importantly, you need to be aligned as a leadership team in terms of the outcomes that we're going to drive to within the company. But in terms of talk about exacerbating what is already happening in technology, I mentioned, we're down to 22% representation of female, and in diverse populations, in Black females, maybe 1%, Dan, is the number. I mean, it is truly alarming. And if we think about AI defining how work is allocated, how decisions are automated, how opportunities are distributed, but we are not representing the population of who we are. Women make up over half of the population. We're actually earning more bachelor's degrees, more master's degrees, and more PhDs. But our voices are missing in AI leadership and tech leadership. So we will continue to create products, create algorithms that is missing half of the population in those products and in those algorithms. This is why my book is also, it's a call to action. And the one other point, Dan, that I want to make is, in these previous huge innovation paradigms that we lived through, you had to be a technologist. I mean, you had to be tech savvy, and you have to want to be part of that. The beauty of AI is you don't have to be a technologist. AI is impacting every sector, every discipline that we have. And what I do is encourage women, encourage young girls. This is an opportunity for you to get involved. I don't care whether you're an attorney, you're a doctor, you're an ethicist, you're a policy person. There's an opportunity and a role for you to play in understanding AI and bringing your voice to the table. That is what the beauty of AI can do for us. It's now up to us to seize the opportunity and make it happen.
Love how you say it. And I'm glad that you did a service by writing the book. You and I first bonded over stories as parents, being concerned, excited maybe, but mostly apprehensive about the workplace that our kids are graduating into, and your kids are a little bit older than mine. What's your advice to all the listeners who can't help but feel anxious about the job market? How do they use AI to their advantage and be afforded the opportunities that they deserve?
Yeah, I think it's important for all young graduates, and I tell this to my own kids. One's working in sports at the NBA. My son's an electrical and biomedical engineer. Yes, they use AI every day in their tools, but learn how to use AI to apply to business policy, business outcomes, how it can be applicable to solving these type of, I'll call them opportunities at an enterprise level. So whatever degree you graduated from, AI will likely have an impact on that. So make sure you're continuing to grow, continuing to learn. And if you're not finding that job right out of school, use this as an opportunity to grow your network, number one. And number two, continue growing, because you're going to be doing that throughout your entire career. In terms of confidence building, yeah, it's frustrating when you come out of school and there's not a job market there. And there's lots of reasons for that. It's just not AI, of course, in terms of what's happening in the market today. But I always say confidence comes by getting really good at what you do and what you know, and practicing that confidence every day. And as I look back on my career, I think about don't tie your identity with a title. Don't tie your loyalty with a particular one company. I would look at the opportunities around you and think, how can I continue to learn and contribute and have an impact in the world? And I think if we're raising our children to be kind, to be socially aware, to be supportive of others, to view each other as equal partners, I think this world would be a heck of a lot of a better place than what we're living in today.
I'm not letting you off the hot seat without answering one last important question for me. You've talked a lot about your leadership style and your core values. Who are your role models, and what have you learned from them?
Dan, so interesting. Growing up in Department of Defense and the career I've had, I don't think I've ever had someone say to me, let me mentor you. And I think what has stood out for me in my career are those male allies that stood up for me when I wasn't in the room, that allowed me a growth opportunity that maybe I didn't apply for, that always had my back and always allowed me to lead with truth and integrity and care about the people that were on my team. And whether it's a mentor, it's a sponsor, I don't think we necessarily need to label it. I think it's more important to say surround yourself with people who care about you, care about your growth, and want to see the best for you. When I think of female role models, and I immediately go to Madeleine Albright, I go to Michelle Obama, I go to Condoleezza Rice, so many incredible women that have broken through, glass ceilings per se. But I think it's really important, and this is a point I make in the book too. There's so many women that when we finally do reach the executive table, that many of us seem to act from a place of scarcity versus abundance, because as we know, there is scarcity. The most important thing we can do as women leaders, and our male allies can continue doing for us, is reaching back and pulling other women forward to the table and other diverse voices, so that that diversity, as we know, drives better business outcomes, represents the world in which we're living today.
So this has been brilliant, as expected. I want you and I both to sign a figurative pledge, and that's that as we have more of these conversations, we watch that number that was 34% when you graduated and is 22% now. Let's commit to being part of the solution. Let's watch that number grow back up, and hopefully over a series of these, it'll surpass 34, which even then is pathetic. But let's do that together.
I'd love to, Dan.
Lisa, where can the audience find out more about the book and more about your great work?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, of course, and I have a website, daviscoreadvisory.com. Please join me on my Substack. I'm also on Instagram with Lisa Davis, talking about values, leadership, and the digital transformation in the AI era. I hope you'll join me.
Brilliant. Lisa, take me up on the offer. Come back soon, and we'll continue the conversation.
Anytime, Dan. Always a pleasure.
Well, that is all the time we have for this week on AI and the Future of Work. As always, I'm your host, Dan Turchin from PeopleRain. And of course, we're back next week with another fascinating guest.
Yo, it's the end of the show. Time to power it down. AI's the sis, but humans wear the crown. Team Human in the house, got the vibe so clever. Dan Turchin from PeopleRain, making us better.
We learned about AI for humans. We're ready to conquer the future. That's all for now.
See you next time.